Dr. Allen didn't gasp. He didn't slam anything down or call for a nurse. He just stopped. He read the paper in his hand one more time. Then he looked up at me, Thomas, and he said nothing for what felt like 4 full seconds. 4 seconds is a long time when a child is asleep in your lap. 4 seconds is an eternity when that child is your granddaughter. Kayla was dead weight against me on a Tuesday afternoon in Charlotte, not napping, absent. Her spirit was miles away, buried under layers of chemical fog. The clinical silence told me my family's books were about to be audited and the deficit was lethal. Before we go further, drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever felt that vibration in your gut that something was wrong with a loved one, even when everyone else told you it was fine? I want to hear your stories. Also, let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who is part of our community. I looked at the results again, repeated, intentional, extended. The paper didn't feel like paper anymore. It felt like a bankruptcy filing for my daughter-in-law's soul. I folded the sheet with the same precision. I used to fold high-stakes financial audits. I didn't cry. I didn't ask the doctor to call the police right then. Dr. Allen whispered, "I am a mandatory reporter. I can't let you take her home in this state, but I can admit her for a 24-hour observation due to a suspected severe allergic reaction. This creates a legal gray area while we wait for the official toxicology results to hit the state database. It gives you a window." I looked at him and nodded. I needed the books to be airtight before I closed the account. He gave me until 8 a.m. the next morning to return after my audit. Dr. Allen studied me. He saw a man who had spent 33 years rebuilding the broken logic of criminal corporations. He knew I wasn't going to the police to complain. I was going home to prepare a slaughter. He gave me until 8 a.m. the next morning. I shook his hand, picked up Kayla, who felt like a limp doll, and walked out into the Charlotte humidity. For decades, my job was to listen for the vibration in a company's numbers, a missing decimal point here, an offshore transfer there. I was the watcher. I was the one who saw the fractures before the building collapsed. But as I strapped Kayla into her car seat, the silence in the truck felt like an indictment. I had been the watcher of everyone else's ledgers, while the deficit in my own family was growing into a catastrophe. This was my silent regret. I saw the signs months ago. I remember Madison's overly rehearsed laughter at Sunday dinners. The way she'd adjust Kayla's hair for a photo with a grip that looked more like an owner than a mother. I'd felt that subtle pull in the steering wheel, that vibration that says the engine is failing, and I'd rationalized it. I'd told myself Tyler was happy. I'd told myself Madison was just ambitious. My silence was a form of subprime lending, and today the interest was due. I didn't drive toward the multi-million-dollar estate Madison had curated in the suburbs. I didn't want the air that smelled like expensive lavender and cheap lies. I drove toward my house. The house she'd built with my son was a high-gloss trap. Every surface was marble, every corner was curated for a lens, and every human being inside was an asset to be optimized. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from Madison read, "Where are you guys? I have a brand meeting in an hour, and I need Kayla to model the new lounge set." I didn't answer. I didn't even read it twice. I just looked at my granddaughter in the rearview mirror and felt the cold clarity settle in. Madison didn't want a daughter. She wanted a prop. And props don't need to be awake. They just need to be still. I carried Kayla into my guest room, tucked her into the sheets that didn't smell like social media fame, and sat at my desk. It was time for a forensic audit of Madison's life. I wasn't just rescuing a child. I was reclaiming a life from a liquidator. And I was going to make sure she was liquidated by morning. I sat in the dark of my study, the only light coming from the twin monitors, displaying 4 years of bank transfers. In my world, numbers don't lie. They just wait for someone with the patience to read them. For 48 months straight, I had been the silent bank for Tyler and Madison. Every first of the month, like clockwork, I moved $4,500 into their joint account. That is $54,000 a year. $216,000 over 4 years. I didn't see it as a gift. I saw it as an investment in my son's peace of mind and my granddaughter's future. I thought I was buying Tyler time to focus on his high stakes medical research in Charlotte without the crushing weight of a mortgage. I thought I was buying Kayla the kind of stability Tyler didn't have after his mother passed. But as I scrolled through the line items tonight, the clarity was lethal. I wasn't a benefactor. I was a subprime lender for a shell corporation built on vanity. I looked at the Kayla Education Fund I'd set up. I'd been depositing an extra $500 a month into that account. Madison had been siphoning it off, $50 here, $100 there. It wasn't for school supplies. It was for aesthetic upgrades to the nursery that was now just a studio for her followers. I looked at the credit card statements I'd subsidized, thousands of dollars spent at luxury boutiques, high-end spas, and organic catering for brunch shoots. I had been footing the bill for the set design of a life that was rotting from the inside out. I had paid for the very lens Madison used to watch my granddaughter fade into the background of a staged reality. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for years. Every time Tyler called, stressed about his lab results, or Madison mentioned unexpected expenses, I topped off the account. I never asked for receipts. I didn't want to be the overbearing father. I wanted to be the safety net. Now I realized I wasn't a net. I was a subscription service. They'd stopped providing content for months ago. I was footing the bill for a version of family that existed only in pixels and lavender-scented lies. I'd been the silent investor in their version of family, thinking I was building a legacy. Instead, I had been the primary shareholder in my granddaughter's suffering. Those monthly payments weren't going toward Kayla's enrichment. They were buying Madison the freedom to sedate her child so she could manage her brand. I was literally paying for the chemicals used to keep my own blood quiet. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was a balance sheet that refused to reconcile. I looked at the final total and felt my eyes grow cold. $216,000. That was the price of my blindness. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I had been the watcher, and I had seen the vibrations, but I chose to believe the paint job was the structure. No more. I closed the laptop, the blue light fading from my face. The audit is final, and I'm calling in the debt. Every single cent. I opened Madison's Instagram page, Madison_mindful mom, 100,000 followers. I scrolled through the grid, and it was a masterpiece of white linens, golden hour lighting, and organic avocados. In every third photo, there was Kayla. In my old life, I audited corporations that hid toxic waste behind high-gloss annual reports. Madison was no different. Her toxic waste was my granddaughter's childhood. I found the Sunday brunch post from 2 weeks ago. The image was perfectly composed. Madison was laughing, a mimosa in hand, looking effortlessly radiant. Tyler was in the background, looking supportively exhausted from a week at the lab. And there was Kayla. She was draped across a velvet armchair, her head tilted back, her eyes peacefully closed. The caption read, "Grateful for these slow, quiet mornings where my little one just wants to soak up the sun." It was a brilliant marketing pivot. Madison had spent years branding Kayla as an indigo child, a rare, advanced soul who craved silence and deep meditation. She told her followers that Kayla's unnatural stillness wasn't lethargy, it was spiritual alignment. She had built a narrative that turned a sedated 8-year-old into a trademarked miracle. I zoomed in on Kayla's face in that high-resolution photo. I saw it now. It was the same heaviness I'd seen at the clinic, the slight slackness of the jaw, the way her hand hung off the side of the chair like dead weight. She wasn't soaking up the sun. She was soaking up the chemicals Madison had used to keep her from disturbing the shot. At 8 years old, Kayla should have been a whirlwind of questions and scraped knees. But Madison had traded my granddaughter's childhood curiosity for a controlled high-gloss vacancy. She didn't just want a quiet child. She wanted a biological statue that wouldn't ruin the framing of a sponsored post. This was the trap of normalized cruelty. Most people think of evil as something loud and violent, but in my experience, The most dangerous kind is clinical. It's the kind that treats human beings as interchangeable assets. Madison didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt her daughter. She just decided that her brand was the primary objective. She had optimized her life to the point where her own child was simply an obstacle to be managed. In her mind, Kayla wasn't a little girl with needs and a voice. She was a high-performing prop. If a prop is too loud, you quiet it. If a prop moves too much, you sedate it until the lighting is just right. She had normalized the idea that her daughter's health was a secondary cost of doing business. It was narcissistic compartmentalization, the same psychological mechanism used by directors who ignore safety reports to boost quarterly dividends. To Madison, the cruelty wasn't the drugging. The cruelty would have been a messy, loud child ruining the aesthetic of a sponsored post for high-end loungewear. I felt a coldness that no balance sheet could ever quantify. She had used my $4,500 a month to buy the set, my son's reputation to build the stage, and my granddaughter's consciousness to keep the audience watching. She thought she was the director of a perfect life. She didn't realize I was the auditor who had just uncovered the fraud. My eyes moved to the next post, a video of Madison talking about honesty and parenting. I didn't click play. I already knew the script. I turned my phone face down, but I could still feel the heat radiating from the screen. It was 11:32 p.m., and the digital assault had begun. Madison hadn't called to ask if her 8-year-old daughter was safe or if she was warm. She called because her schedule had been compromised, and in her world, a compromised schedule is a high-risk liability. The first text was a clinical threat typed with the kind of precision people usually reserve for legal disclaimers. Thomas, you have exactly 60 minutes to return Kayla, or I am calling the Charlotte police and filing a report for kidnapping. I have the Ring camera footage of you taking her. Do not test me. I didn't respond. In a forensic audit, the first rule is to never alert the subject that you've already found the missing funds. You let them keep digging the hole. When the kidnapping threat didn't get a response, she shifted her strategy. She went for the weak link in the system, my son. Tyler is a brilliant medical researcher, but he lives in a constant state of professional stress. Madison knows exactly how to weaponize his anxiety. I watched the notifications on my tablet as she began to gaslight him. She wasn't just lying. She was attempting to rewrite my medical history. Tyler, your father has finally snapped. She messaged him. He took Kayla, and he's acting erratic. He's talking to himself and refusing to let me speak to her. I think the mental deterioration we've been worried about is finally here. He's dangerous, Tyler. You need to leave the lab and come home before he does something we can't fix. This was a surgical strike. She was attempting to isolate me by painting me as a deteriorating old man, turning my son into her guard dog. She even started a vague post campaign for her 100,000 followers. She posted a black and white photo of an empty hallway with a caption about unpredictable family dynamics and protecting your peace from toxic elders. She was building a narrative of victimhood in real time, preparing the audience for my eventual liquidation from their lives. The real emergency came through at 1:15 a.m. Kayla needs to be back by 10 a.m. for the sun-drenched morning shoot. It's a $10,000 contract, Thomas. If she isn't here, I'm holding you personally responsible for the lost revenue. This is our livelihood. You're messing with, there it was, the true bottom line. My granddaughter wasn't a child to her. She was a $10,000 line item, a high-performing asset that was currently offline. Madison was panicked because the Mindful Mom brand was about to hit a production delay. I sat in the silence of my kitchen and thought about the vibrations I'd ignored for years. This wasn't a family dispute. It was a hostile takeover by a narcissistic CEO who had treated her own daughter as a depreciating resource. I didn't answer a single message. I went back to my spreadsheet, documenting every timestamp of her threats. The audit was nearly complete, and I was just waiting for the last few entries to post. I stopped being a grandfather for a few hours and became a forensic accountant again. I didn't need a hug. I needed a subpoena. I called James Whitfield. James is an attorney who doesn't believe in coincidences, only patterns that haven't been fully documented yet. I walked into his office in downtown Charlotte and laid my spreadsheets on his mahogany desk. I didn't tell him about the lavender scented threats or the Instagram posts. I showed him the deficit. I showed him how $216,000 of my money had vanished into a lifestyle that was sedating my granddaughter. James looked at the numbers and then at the pharmacy records I'd traced. He didn't offer condolences. He gave me a phone number for Ray Dobbins. Ray is a private investigator who specializes in the kind of high stakes corporate espionage that usually involves offshore accounts. But he told me family betrayals are much easier to track. They always leave a paper trail because they are driven by ego, and ego is messy. I met Ray at a quiet park near the medical research facility where Tyler works. I handed him the audit of the Kale Education Fund. We found the leak. It was a monthly outflow of $2,200 hidden under the category of specialized learning consultants. But the money wasn't going to a teacher. It was the monthly rent for a high-rise luxury studio in Midtown Charlotte. A secret second life subsidized by my granddaughter's future. Madison had been using my money to pay for her creative retreat, but Ray found the other name on the visitor logs. Zachary wasn't just a stranger. He was Tyler's supervisor, the man who sat at our table during the holidays and praised my son's dedication to science. While Tyler was pulling 14-hour shifts in the lab, Zachary was pulling his wife into a midtown studio I was paying for. It was a closed loop system of exploitation. Zachary would assign Tyler extra night shifts, citing urgent data processing, and Madison would use that window of time to meet him. And Kayla was the only variable that didn't fit into their schedule. So they neutralized her. They turned her consciousness into a manageable expense so they could maintain their equilibrium. I sat in my truck and watched the sun start to rise over the Charlotte skyline. I didn't feel the heat of rage. I felt the cold, analytical precision of a man who had finally seen the full scope of the fraud. This wasn't just an affair. It was a consolidated balance sheet of lies. They had used my son's work, my money, and my granddaughter's safety as collateral for their pleasure. The professional escalation was complete. The audit trail was closed. I had the dates, the times, and the signatures. Now, I just needed to file the final report. Ray Dobbins didn't look like a man who carried the weight of a family's destruction in his pocket. But as he sat across from me in that park, he handed me the final evidence of a criminal deficit. I'd spent my career auditing companies that were failing, but this was the first time I'd audited a homicide in the making. The private investigator had dug deeper into Madison's digital footprint and found a secure folder on her laptop. Inside was a life insurance policy. Madison had taken it out on Tyler behind his back exactly 14 months ago. She had forged Tyler's electronic signature on a dozen compliance forms while he was half comatose from the very pills she'd been slipping into his coffee. It was a cold-blooded paper trail of fraud designed to look like his own consent. The payout was $250,000. The chilling clarity of the ledger finally reconciled. In my line of work, we call this a liquidation strategy. Madison didn't just want a new life with Zachary, she wanted a windfall to fund it. But the twist was even more predatory. We found a series of messages between her and a black market pharmacy contact. She wasn't just using over-the-counter medicine anymore. She had been stealing Tyler's own prescribed anxiety medication, high-potency benzodiazepines, to keep Kayla under. Then she spent months gaslighting my son, telling him he was losing his mind and misplacing his pills because of his stress at the lab. I sat on that park bench and felt the world tilt. If I hadn't shown up with that birthday gift, if I hadn't noticed the vibration in Kayla's slow eyes, I know exactly how this report would have ended. Tyler would have eventually accidentally overdosed on his own meds, or he would have been driven to a breakdown so severe that Madison could claim the $250,000. While Zachary provided the emotional support she needed, they were using my granddaughter as a practice run for sedation, a quiet variable they could neutralize until they were ready to close the primary account. My son, this was the world without Thomas, a world where my silence would have been the final signature on their predatory contract. I looked at the photos of Tyler's supervisor, Zachary, and thought about the normalized cruelty Madison had perfected. She wasn't a mother. She was a venture capitalist of human misery, seeking the highest return on her betrayal. I closed the folder and looked at Ray. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was as steady as a balanced ledger. I had the kill shot evidence. The criminal twist was documented, verified, and ready for filing. Madison thought she was managing a child. She didn't realize she was being audited by a man who knows that in the end, every debt must be paid in full. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, and made one last call. The time for observation was over. It was time for the final audit. The address in Midtown was a high rise with a view of the Charlotte skyline. I invited Tyler to meet me there at 7 p.m. He looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped from the weight of a life Madison had been sabotaging for 14 months. He thought we were just having a quiet dinner to discuss the kidnapping Madison was accusing me of. He didn't know I had brought the final audit. We walked to the fourth floor. I didn't knock. Tyler, as the legal holder of the joint account used to lease this space, led the way. We didn't need a warrant. We were just reclaiming the property bought with our stolen trust. I pushed the door open, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive lavender and the sound of Madison's laughter. She was sitting on a white leather sofa, a glass of wine in her hand, leaning into Zachary. Tyler went completely still. The vibration I had felt in the steering wheel for years finally reached his heart and broke it. Madison jumped up, her mindful mom facade cracking into 1,000 jagged pieces. She started to scream about her reputation and my supposed mental decline, but I didn't let her finish. I stepped forward and laid the folder on the coffee table. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the cold, rhythmic precision of a man reading a bankruptcy filing. I laid out the toxicology report, repeated. Intentional, extended, I said. I laid out the pharmacy records proving she had been stealing Tyler's medication. I laid out the $250,000 life insurance policy she had taken out on my son behind his back. I showed her the receipts for this luxury studio paid for with the $2,200 a month she had siphoned from the Kayla Education Fund. This wasn't an affair, Madison, I told her. It was a liquidation strategy. You sedated my granddaughter to buy time for your brand and your supervisor. Zachary tried to stand, but his knees were weak. He was a corporate predator who realized he was currently being audited by a man who doesn't miss a decimal point. I looked at Madison. Her eyes were red, but not from regret. She was panicked because the Mindful Mom brand was about to hit a total loss. I told her the Charlotte police and the district attorney had already received the encrypted file of my audit. The evidence of child endangerment was undeniable. I wasn't just bluffing. The authorities were already processing the warrants to strike her set. Justice doesn't come with a soundtrack. It comes with court dates and a whole lot of silence. Madison is currently facing felony charges. Tyler was awarded full custody within 60 days. They moved into my home to heal. The final image I carry isn't the confrontation. It's Kayla in my garden, finally awake, finally alert, and laughing as she plays with Grace, her favorite stuffed elephant. I've come to realize that we often ignore the vibrations in our lives because we are afraid of the overhaul. I spent years being the silent investor in a version of family that was rotting from the inside out. If you find yourself in a similar situation, always feeling like the outsider or the cash cow for people who only see you as a resource, remember this: your compassion is not an overdraft protection for someone else's cruelty. Boundaries are the only ledger that keeps you safe. Reclaim your worth. Stop footing the bill for people who treat you like a depreciating asset. Forgiveness is for your freedom, but silence is no longer an option when the debt is this high. If Thomas's precision helped you see family boundaries in a new light, share this video. Justice isn't loud, it's documented. Join our community for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. Thank you for being a part of Dad's Raw Revenge. I will see you on the next one.